Good evening, and welcome to the spring webinar series, Resources for Cannabis Businesses. My name is Natalie Darvis, and I am the chair of the business department of Oaksterdam University, the first and longest running cannabis college in the world. I'm excited to be your moderator for this evening's topic, the business of cannabis manufacturing. We are here tonight because the Department of Cannabis Regulation has officially launched the Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance, or BLC program, to assist social equity applicants in the city of LA with obtaining a commercial cannabis license and operating a successful cannabis business. This series is part of broader BLC program efforts, which also include live webinars with different subjects and experts, checklists, worksheets, and other management tools that you can download and use, and self-directed online education on important topics related to running a successful cannabis business through the BLC's new learning management system, which is usually referred to as the LMS. Please visit cannabis.lacity.org for more announcements on our ever-expanding BLC program. As part of the city's social equity program, DCR has launched the BLC LMS portal, where you now have access to these recorded webinars in addition to online courses and digital resources made especially for you. Information on how to access this LMS will be in the chat. Please note that there is a much longer educational series on tonight's topic that is already live in this LMS. So please check out this series, The Business of Cannabis Manufacturing, and the BLC LMS soon. Before we get started with tonight's topic, I have a few housekeeping rules. Please note this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed after the editing process via multiple channels. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during this session. You will be able to hear and see all the panelists, however. There is an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information. Please ask questions about this subject matter in the Q&A box. We are gathering them and will be responding to as many of your questions as possible during the Q&A session towards the last 20 minutes of tonight's webinar. You are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen, and chat is available for interaction with other participants. If you use the Q&A box for your questions, everyone will be able to see the questions when they are answered. And a friendly reminder, please use caution when sharing personal information in a public forum, and keep your questions focused on tonight's topic as it's going to move fast this evening. So without further ado, it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce you to tonight's subject matter expert, Dr. Stephanie Gangano. Stephanie Gangano holds a doctorate in analytical chemistry from the University of Florida and is the co-chair of the Extracts and Manufacturing Department at Oaksterdam University. She has been working professionally for 27 plus years in both the laboratory and manufacturing sectors of highly regulated industries. She currently owns a cannabis consulting firm that specializes in designing, developing, and licensing cannabis businesses in the state of California and within the tribal reservation of the Ipe Nation of Santa Isabel. At the local level, Dr. Gangano has successfully helped her clients navigate the Cannabis Equity Program in San Francisco by helping individuals qualify as equity verified applicants and assisting existing cannabis companies to become qualified as equity incubators. Good evening, Stephanie.
Hi, Natalie. It's great to be here. Thanks for that introduction.
It's my pleasure. It's always my pleasure to introduce you, Stephanie. All right, well, let's go ahead and start your screen share and let's dive into this really great content.
All right, let's get this pulled up here.
Awesome.
Great. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here to talk about the business of cannabis manufacturing.
You are quite the expert, so we're in for a wonderful presentation, and I'll see you back here in a little bit for Q&A. Take it away.
All right, sounds great. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm really excited. I love talking about the cannabis business and in particular about the business of manufacturing. So let's get into it. All right, so as an overview, what we're going to talk about tonight is the manufacturing business models and the role of manufacturing in the supply chain. So in other words, we're going to talk about how manufacturing businesses make money and how they partner and fit in with the other types of licensed cannabis businesses. We're also going to talk about some of the basic startup requirements, such as facilities and permits and that sort of thing. and the costs that go into making cannabis products and doing manufacturing, and also the revenue that can be made. Then we're going to dive into the scope of manufacturing opportunity. So in other words, what kind of opportunities are out there for manufacturing? And there's definitely plenty of them. Now, this is going to be a very short presentation, but if you want a closer look at all these topics and much, much more detail, it's all available in the DCR's Learning Management System presentations. Okay, so let's dive into the manufacturing business model and the role in the supply chain. Now, what is manufacturing, right? At its basic level, right? You want to take raw materials, such as cannabis biomass, and then you want to turn them into, in the end, consumer products or the components that will then be made to produce consumer products. Most things that we buy in life are manufactured, and cannabis products are no different than that. Okay, so when you're in a cannabis manufacturing facility as a business, you're going to be taking cannabis biomass or flower and or extracts. So that's going to be your cannabis inputs. And you're going to combine that with some sort of non-cannabis ingredients or materials. So for instance, if you're making edibles, that might be food products, food ingredients, or even just the hardware. If you're making vape cartridges, say, you would be combining with the hardware of the cartridge itself and turning those ingredients into a final consumer product. Now, a lot of people, when you talk about manufacturing, you know, they say, like, I want to be a cannabis manufacturer. You say, oh, what kind of business do you want to run? Well, I want to do butane extractions, or I want to do ethanol extractions, or what have you. We have to understand that extraction and manufacturing, those terms are not interchangeable. So extraction is a subtype or a type of manufacturing, right? In extraction, it's very specific. You're trying to take the cannabis biomass or an extract input and take out the desirable compounds such as cannabinoids and terpenes and separate that from the plant material. You can then produce a finished product or ingredient for other products from that process, but that's what extraction is. Now, manufacturing, on the other hand, is the whole business of making a cannabis product. And you may or may not be doing extraction. So I just wanted to have a very sort of clear distinction between those two phrases, extraction versus manufacturing. In the supply chain, right, manufacturing is only one type of a cannabis license that somebody may have. There's other businesses that you would have in the supply chain. So if you think about it in broader terms, right, cultivators obviously grow the plant material. Manufacturers would take that plant material and they might extract it into other products, or they may take the plant material and just package it for sale later on. But they are the people who will be converting that raw biomass into something else. So you got your cultivators, you got your manufacturers, and then you have distributors who actually move the different products around. Distributors would take your manufactured product, they would have to have a portion of it go to a third-party testing lab, a cannabis testing laboratory, so that they can be cleared through all the regulatory requirements for safe products. And then the distributor also moves it then to the retailer, and from the retailer, it goes to the end consumer. So there's a whole supply chain of what you need and where the manufacturing fits into it. There's also a whole other supply chain for all your non-cannabis items, right? You have your packaging material, your labels, your jars, just everything else that you would need, any of the food ingredients if you're making some sort of edible, the flour, the sugar, the gelatin, and that sort of thing. So we always have to think about the supply chain, where we fit into it, and how we need to interact and partner with various other entities in that supply chain. All right. So now that we've got a little bit of those basics down as to what extraction is versus manufacturing, let's talk about the business model. So as a refresher, a business model is basically how a business makes money, right? And how you're setting up, what your whole plan is, how you're going to make money. And you want to make money in manufacturing by turning some cannabis input into a final product, getting that product out to a retailer and to an end consumer. And hopefully you're going to take that product and make it for less money than you're able to sell it for. That's where the profit comes in. And there's lots of different business models that you can have for a manufacturer business, right? You can take your biomass and just make that bulk extracts. And maybe those bulk extracts go to a different kind of manufacturer who's going to turn it into a product. So you can set up your business so that you're simply doing business to business sales, and your products are going to different manufacturers, then they can make the final products out of it. You can take your biomass and convert it all the way down into a consumer product. You can not even be doing extraction. Maybe you're buying extracts from somebody else and then turning it into other products like vape cartridges or edibles of some sort, or lotions, infused lotions, and that sort of thing. And so you're taking bulk extracts, turning it into consumer products. There's lots of different business models. They all have pros and cons. It just depends on how you want to set up your own business. And then there's also partnership models that you could look into. And these would be set up where you're basically constructing supply agreements that you could have with different licensed cannabis businesses, so that you can, share the responsibilities of who's doing what. One of the types of partnership models you could have is co-packing, right? Co-packing is where you are taking other products that somebody else has, and you're simply packaging it, labeling it, and sending it on its way. So you could be a co-packer for a cultivator who is wanting to get their flower out, but not wanting to do the packing themselves in their facility. You could co-brand. You could also white label. White label is where you're going to actually be making the product itself. Like maybe you're going from either cannabis biomass or extracts into a gummy, say, a certain gummy, and you're really great at that. Your facility and your talent, the people that work there, they're really great at making gummies. And then you sell it under somebody else's brand name. So it's not your company's name being out in the market, but white labeling, so that they're basically buying your product and having their name be on it. It's a lucrative way to make money. And there's also another partnership model that's a little bit unique to the cannabis industry itself, which is a shared space. And I'm going to go into this a little bit later on when I'm talking about the licensing. But essentially, you could have a fully licensed manufacturing facility in which you are then having other licensed manufacturers come in and use your facility for them to make their own products. And there's a lot of compliance and a lot of management that happens with that. But it's another way to partner. So let's talk a little bit about the experience and the qualifications of the people that you want to have on your team, the required competencies to be able to run a really great manufacturing operation. So first, you're going to need somebody who has some sort of prior manufacturing operations experience. And it does not have to be in the cannabis industry. It's very advantageous if you can have them have worked in some other manufacturing business of any sort, because they will understand the mechanics of how to run a manufacturing operation, and especially if they had to follow good manufacturing practices. That's going to go a long way towards the organization and the documentation that is necessary to stay in compliance running a manufacturing operation. You're also going to need to have somebody who's a really good formulator, a product formulator. Long days, long ago, you could just sort of like slap some products together and they didn't have to be the same every single time. But now that everything is very highly regulated in this industry, you're going to want somebody who's really nuanced in whatever product it is you're making, the ins and outs of it, the tricks of the trade, how you can make your products really stable, how you can make them very safe. A product formulation specialist is definitely a must. The other thing you're going to want is somebody who's really good at sourcing cannabis materials, somebody who has connections, somebody who knows the people in the other supply chain that you may need to interact with, such as cultivators or other manufacturers who are making extracts. It's really good because you never want to be out of your cannabis material. You can either, you'd want this person to be able to sort of like source out new sources, either for cost benefit or if there's some unique, special, new kind of, input material out there that you're looking to get. But also just to keep things moving, you need to stay on top of getting your input material ready. And finally, you do need great marketing and sales people. A lot of times people think, well, if I'm just making a good product, then it's going to sell itself. No. It doesn't really work that way. You need to have somebody who's skilled in marketing and sales. My background is manufacturing and compliance and licensing and that sort of thing is very, left-brained, documentation kind of work. And sometimes some of my clients will be like, well, what do you think of this name for a new product? What do you think of that name? And I'm like, I am not the person to ask for that. Like, I can't, marketing people really know how to get a good turn of phrase, how they can, make a catchy name to a product, that sort of thing. So they are specialized people that you will want on your team. Let's talk a little bit about some of the basic startup requirements, the costs of running a manufacturing operation, and also how you make some revenue. Okay. In this section, we're going to be talking about the facility requirements, some of the licensing requirements, what kind of equipment you might need, and then, the talent to run it all. So when you're looking for facilities, number one thing is that every city that I have worked with folks in, every city has their own green zone, which is going to be the area where they're going to even allow cannabis businesses to operate in, especially manufacturing. Usually manufacturers have to stay within either a light or heavy manufacturing zones, but you need to work with your city. They usually have this information online about, what is the green zone, the area where you can have your manufacturing facility. So don't even look anywhere else. You may know somebody who has a warehouse over on a certain place in town, but if it's not in the green zone, you're not going to be able to get licensed over there. Now, as far as the size or type of facility, it's all going to depend on the business model that you're choosing. So that's where that business model comes in very handy again. You have to know what it is you want to do. You may want to just have a packaging facility and you're going to be packaging, vape carts or flowers or something like that. So you may only need, a 1,500 square foot warehouse with, some basic ventilation requirements and electrical requirements, and nothing really special that you'd have to do a lot of tenant improvements on the facility. Or you might be doing certain actual extractions where you need to have a more upgraded or scientific style ventilation. Maybe your equipment requires certain electrical requirements. You're going to have to upgrade the electrical I've known people who have had to work with, the power company to actually put in whole new transformers because they needed so much power. So before you can choose your facility, again, you got to have your business model and know, what it is you need to do. And there's certain specific requirements for different kinds of manufacturing facilities. Okay, the license requirements. There's going to be licensing requirements from your city level and from the state level. So these license types that are listed here are the state Department of Cannabis Control license types. Let's ignore the one on the bottom, the type S for now. But when you look at type 7, type 6, N, and P, one thing to keep in mind is if you have, say, a type 7 license, you can do everything that's underneath a 7 license. You could do all the activities of a 6, an N, and a P. Same deal if you have a type 6 license, you're going to be able to do all the activities of a 6, an N, and a P, and so forth. You get the idea. So a type 7 is a volatile extraction manufacturing license. It is not currently available in LA, as I understand it. That would be your butane, propane extractions and that sort of thing. It's one of, those are very volatile chemicals. They're prone to meeting very specific and stringent safety requirements. And LA is not allowing it at this time. A type 6 license is the non-volatile extraction. And that would be like your ethanol extractions or rosin press or ice water hash, that sort of thing. And type 6 is a pretty popular license that people get if they want to actually do extraction in their manufacturing facility. Type N is infused product manufacturing. So that's where you would be buying extract from somebody else. So you're not actually doing the extraction yourself, but you're taking that extract and infusing it into products. So if you want to make any sort of gummies, edibles, lotions, patches, vape cartridges, that sort of thing. If you're not planning to do extraction, you could get a type N and do your infused product manufacturing and your own packaging. And if you want to just do non-infused product manufacturing, that would be a type P license. There's non-infused product manufacturing is a lot of like packaging of cannabis flower into jars and making pre-rolls, that sort of thing. With the pre-rolls though, you can't infuse them with any kind of oil. So you can't make infused pre-rolls, you could just make regular pre-rolls. So those are the different kinds of license types. They have different requirements for them. So that's why, you just look at your business model and what you're planning to do. You can always, if you want to expand your business later or change the business model, you can do that and you can change your license type. They have different costs to the different types of licenses and that sort of thing. Now, type S is really interesting. It's a shared manufacturing facility. So what you would do in that case, if you wanted to have a shared license, what you would do is you would get either a type 6 N or P license, and then you would enroll it to be a shared license. And if it goes through, then you can have other licensed cannabis businesses come into your facility and use your facility and your equipment. So what it does is it allows other manufacturers to not have to have their own facilities. They can use your facilities. But there are a lot of requirements and a lot of regulations and rules around that, such as only one company can be working at a time. Each company that you bring in has to have their own specific storage where they can lock up their in-process products and their products and that sort of thing. So it's a great business model. It's a great concept. If you really say you don't really want to do your own manufacturing, but you want to provide a facility for others to do manufacturing, it's one thing to consider. Okay. Other kinds of approvals. You're going to need all your local approvals, right? Local planning approvals, building approvals, You're going to have the fire marshals come in and sign off on your building, on your improvements, on your electrical. There's all kinds of local planning that needs to happen. If you're making any kind of food or edibles, it's going to require approval from the local public health authorities. You're also going to have to, if you're making any kind of edibles, the workers who are making the edibles have to get food handling certifications, just like you would working in a commercial kitchen and that sort of thing. And of course, all the facilities must meet the OSHA and safety standards. OSHA is Occupational Safety Hazard Authorities, so they are charged with making sure that the workplace environment is safe and that all the employees are safe within it. Okay, the equipment. Again, the equipment that you're going to need in your manufacturing facility is going to depend on your business model and what it is that you plan to do. So if you're going to be doing extraction, you're going to have extraction equipment. The type of extraction equipment is going to depend on what kind of extraction you're doing. You know, your ethanol machines, your rotovaps, your all sorts of different kinds of, maybe you're having like a distillation equipment in there, that sort of thing. You're going to need commercial grade food preparation and storage appliances if you're making edibles. You know, the products that you're making may need to be refrigerated. So you have to get commercial grade, you know, freezers and refrigerators. The freezers and refrigerators are going to have like external temperature monitors on it. You're going to have to keep a log of the temperatures on a, you know, say a weekly basis to make sure that the temperature it's supposed to be is the temperature it is. That all runs into the compliance regulations. You're going to need measurement and dosing, automation, instrumentation, or equipment. Anytime that you're handling cannabis or cannabis extracts, cannabis products in your facility, as you're making them, you have to weigh things out. You have to have specific scales that you're using to weigh. The scales have to be calibrated, usually by the county weighmaster. They come in once a year and they calibrate your scales and they give you a little certification sticker to say that, you know, they're working properly. There's a lot of different, you know, again, compliance regulations that you have to follow. And you may need, you know, packaging gear, filling gear. There's a lot of equipment that goes into manufacturing products. And sometimes, you know, sometimes maybe you start out with just manpower and you have a lot of manual measuring and filling, but if you really want to scale up and automate the process, you're going to need equipment. The big question always becomes, well, how much is this all going to cost? And the answer, not a popular one, is it depends. Again, it depends on your business model. It depends on what you're doing and how you're going to do it. So you know, a good estimate is anywhere from $1 million to $10 million. That's from ArcView, which is a leading cannabis investment firm. You know, and I would say that definitely you want to have at least $1 million in your reserves, because there's a lot of costs that, you know, you just can't plan for. There's a cost you do plan for. There's a cost that you don't plan for. So you need to have quite a bit of money in reserves to get your business up and started. So now that you want to have your manufacturing operation, what's the scope of the opportunity? Well, manufactured products are still the fastest growing product category out there, and especially with beverages. Beverages right now are a very fast growing category, and edibles, other different types of edibles, and pre-rolls have always been very good opportunities. So if you come up with, you know, something that your customers need and want, and you can get into the business with sort of a low barrier to entry, it's a great way to go. Also, you might consider, you know, serving other license holders, or you can build your own brand. So you really want to think about, you know, your opportunity out there. What the facility, some of the, you know, barriers to entry are that the facility is going to be, you know, sometimes difficult to get. There's equipment requirements. You need access to biomass. You need access to extracts. And you need to recruit talent. Like what is the recruiting possibility in the areas in which you want to set up? You know, who's out there? What kind of talent do you have? Or what kind of talent would you then need to train? So these are some of the barriers to the entry. There's also certain risks in manufacturing. There's product safety. Just like any kind of manufactured product, there's a possibility that, you know, something can be off in it. It can be contaminated, it's spoiled. I mean, there are definitely, there's definitely ways in which you can protect against some of that, but there is some liability and product safety risks there. You could have supply chain issues in which you're not able to get certain ingredients and your manufacturing line goes down. And there's also, as I sort of alluded to throughout this talk tonight, there's a lot of compliance issues. And when the inspectors come out from the state to, you know, take a look at your facility, there's a lot of compliance documentation processing that they're going to be looking at, and it's very challenging to keep up with the compliance end. So one of the things you might be thinking of is, you know, how can I find some of the underserved needs in the area and then maybe get a little niche for your business? Right now, there's a lot of emphasis on non-euphoric products or low euphoric products like the high CBD or the minor cannabinoid products. Not a lot of people are making that, but it's really good for some of the medicinal effects that people are looking for. Some people are looking for specific effects like just, you know, calm. Is it calm, a calm product? Is it energizing? You know, a very specific effect. Or you can be trying to create a product that closely mimics a certain terpene profile of a certain cultivar. That could be a great way to make products. You can look at dietary restrictions. There's a lot of people out there, especially with edibles, you know, if they are diabetic and can't have sugar, or if they're gluten intolerant, you want to make a gluten-free product. There's a lot of different tiny niches out there that you might be able to pop in and have your manufacturing products fill those needs. It's always great to keep your ear to the ground and try to figure out what those underserved needs might be. And you also want to keep an eye on your growth options or opportunities, right? You may start out kind of small. Maybe you're just going to be a certain type of manufacturer, but all of a sudden, you know, you think, hey, if I start growing my own biomass, then I will have control over it, of the particular cultivar, of the when it harvests, when it comes in, that sort of thing. So you can add cultivation. You could add extraction if you're not doing extraction. This way, if you're finding you're having a little trouble getting access to good, consistent extracts, then you can add your own extraction. So think about your growth options for the future. You might diversify your product line, add in different kinds of products, or you might need to expand your facility if everything's going great and you need to, you know, increase your product line. So for the market outlook, there are clear leaders are emerging, but demand is also growing, right? So think about that. Consumers are developing more specific preferences as more people are buying cannabis products and experiencing them and figuring out what they like and don't like. There's a lot of specific preferences out there, and maybe you can figure out where the trends are going. And if you can make a really popular brand, that would be valuable. There's a lot of brand loyalty in this market. And if somebody knows that, you know, your product is consistent, it's tasty, it gives them the effect they want, they will seek it out no matter where they are. So if you get into, you know, here in California, like you can get your products into, you know, multiple dispensaries in multiple cities, that sort of thing. People will look for your product if it's a popular brand and they are really loyal to it. So I want to thank you for your attention, and hopefully this has given you a nice taste of what the business of cannabis manufacturing is, and I'd be happy to answer any of the questions. Natalie?
Great. Yes, thank you, Stephanie. That was amazing. It was like such a fulsome look at it's quite a complicated sector. You can go ahead and stop your screen share, and I have a whole bunch of questions for you. So while you're setting that up, the first question is, what types of manufacturing businesses do you see as having the lowest barriers to entry in Los Angeles? So be that cost or facility. And then, just a reminder for audience, and you already stated this, that the Type 7 volatile license is currently not available in the social equity program. So outside the Type 7, what do you think is the lowest barrier to entry right now for these new social equity entrepreneurs?
I think the lowest barrier for entry would be the Type P license, right? Because the Type P license is the non-infused license. Basically, you could set up an operation where you are packaging flower from cultivators, and you are making pre-rolls. You really don't need a whole lot of specialized equipment, specialized facility improvements like ventilation and electrical and that sort of thing.
That's a great plan. And I think a lot of people aren't aware that even though cultivators are making all this biomass, all this flower, it still has to all be packaged up. And most cultivators, they're not going to want to do that, right? They want to focus on what they do really well. So I think that's some really good advice.
Yeah, I think the cultivators want to sell by the pound and get it out of the facility and just keep growing.
Absolutely. I know you have quite a remarkable educational background. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you think are some great preparatory degree programs to prepare for a career in manufacturing, especially extraction?
I think there are some great programs out there. It's been a long time since I've been in school, but I think definitely if you can get some sort of background in biology, chemistry, plant physiology, some of those science courses, I think it would really help, because you'll get a better understanding of what you're trying to get off the plants and how to separate, the cannabinoids and the terpenes from the plant material if you really want to do extraction, and really understand what those compounds are and boiling points and distillation numbers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable how science heavy manufacturing and extraction especially is. And I think that a lot of people are missing this grand opportunity right now to become, a specialist in these fields in cannabis, but it does require, a lot of education in areas like what you have in analytical chemistry. But I think it's, a really compelling market for people to look at. I think a lot of cannabis companies are always looking for people with these skills. You brought up distillation, and you've heard me ask you this question before. I think it's always great for every audience to hear this. What is the big difference between cannabis distillate and cannabis isolate? Because I think that's something that, probably these new entrepreneurs are still trying to sort out themselves.
Okay. So you have to think about it in terms of degrees, right? So a cannabis distillate, so a cannabis extract, right, is where you take the goodies off of the cannabis plant, the cannabinoids, all the cannabinoids and the terpenes, and you separate that from the plant material, the chlorophyll, the waxes and lipids and stuff, right? But it still has a certain percentage. If people are used to hearing percentages, right? So an extract, a crude or semi-refined extract might have, 75% cannabinoids in it. Then you go through a distillation process where you are further refining that oil or extract into a higher percentage of just either one major and a couple of minor cannabinoids. Like if you're making a THC distillate, it's going to have 90% THC in it, and maybe 1 or 2% of CBG, CBC, CBD, some of the other cannabinoids. When you go to isolate, you're going one step further, and you essentially have you refine it further till you have 99.9% of one single cannabinoid itself. It can be THC or CBD or CBG or CBN, can be any of them, but it's only one and really no other percentage of anything else.
Great, thank you. I just always think it's so great for people to hear this breakdown, especially as they're learning more about the extraction and manufacturing space. So what do you think are some customer or consumer health considerations that manufacturing operators should consider when preparing their businesses? So, for example, we probably all remember from a few years ago all the concerns around vape carts. And I think that this is still a major concern, especially for folks new to the industry that are looking to start a manufacturing business. So what are some consumer health considerations, that you would strongly encourage a new entrepreneur to consider?
Okay, that's a great question. One of the things I would think about, and this sounds really simple, the products that you're making as a manufacturer are going in somebody's body.
Yeah.
Like if you can keep that in mind, that one simple sentence, it will allow you to see your facility in a whole different light. There's, even as much as like how clean you keep the manufacturing facility, the cleanliness of it, how to keep dust down, how to keep dirt out of your products. A lot of times you see manufacturing facilities and you see these big, long stainless steel tables and stuff. Take a look up sometimes. What's above those tables? What's above the tables that can be filtering down onto the tables while you're filling your vape cartridges or making your pre-rolls or, making your gummies and stuff. So that's one thing that I would really consider is, that's kind of like a very high level. It sounds really simple, but
no, but I think it's great. I mean, it helps you think about everything you're doing, in a very specific lens.
Right. And then at a more like minute level, any ingredient that you're thinking of putting into your product, you should think about what that ingredient is used for, what it's authorized for, and if it's not specifically authorized to be used a certain way, don't put it in your product, right? So there's that level and that's where the vitamin E acetate in the vape cartridges a couple of years ago came into play. People were just thinking, well, it's vitamin E, it can go into a vape cartridge. And even some of the flavorings that are put into vape cartridges, right? They may be approved for ingestion, like in a food flavoring that you're going to eat.
Yeah.
But they've never been approved for inhalation into somebody's lungs, right? So you can't have that in your products. And then on a different level, there's also like the hardware that you're using, right? There's a lot of vape cartridges out there that there's a lot of different brands of the actual cartridge itself, not within the cartridge, but the cartridge hardware itself. There's a lot of heavy metals that leach out of those cartridges depending on who's making them, what the brand is. So you want to think about, all your packaging and what your product is touching and what can leach into it. And that sort of thing is also what a chemist is really good at thinking about.
That's great. And, I know there's been actually a lot of issues in the supply chain on the hardware for all of these extracts. And so it's something for these new entrepreneurs to consider. A lot of these vape carts are not manufactured, like the hardware itself are not manufactured in the United States. So these are all these things you have to look out for when you're starting one of these businesses and think through.
Right.
So how different are the standards for a cannabis manufacturing facility than, a non-cannabis manufacturing space? And I know that there's a wide array of manufacturing spaces, but do you see a lot of difference in the standards, or in your opinion, do you think there's a lot of similarities?
I think there's actually a lot of similarities. There's certain, safety requirements. There's certain safety requirements for both the equipment and the people, running the equipment. There's a lot of the same ventilation requirements, documentation requirements, maintenance requirements. They're just broad categories. And that's why I mentioned that it's really great to have somebody on your team who has worked in a manufacturing operation before. And, it doesn't have to be cannabis, because they should be used to an understanding of, one, how to read regulations, first of all, so that your facility runs the way the DCC wants it to run, but also just in general, like, back in 2016, before regulations were even written, right? We didn't even have the regulations yet. I was helping to set up manufacturing businesses, cannabis businesses. And basically, I would tell my clients, I've worked in pharmaceuticals and chemical industry and the food industry, and I'm just going to set this up the same way that, those other industries operate. And I'm going to let the regulations catch up to us. And that's, and that worked out pretty well.
Absolutely. It was very forecasting. And generally those are usually considered CGMP, right? Can you tell me what that acronym stands for, and how you see its future positioning in the cannabis space?
Yeah, the CMGP is current good manufacturing practices. And that embodies sort of a collective of manufacturing practices that are used throughout different industries. And that's basically what, I would use as a guideline to set up industry. So for instance, people know they have to have SOPs, or standard operating procedures, for how to do a certain process on their manufacturing floor. But where that stems from in the good manufacturing practices is that first you create a master manufacturing record, which is the broad recipe. Say this is what you need to do step by step to make a certain product. From that master record, you have to create a batch record that follows the master record, but it is actually sort of the step by step of what needs to happen, but whoever is doing the step has to initial it, that I cleaned off all the tables and made sure, according to our cleaning protocol XYZ, made sure the tables were all clean before I put the cannabis biomass on top of it. Check and initial. And it's just a step by step, right? So you have a master record, you have the batch record for every batch of cannabis product that you make or extraction that you do. You have to have your maintenance logs, your maintenance records. There's just a whole list of documentation that comes out of the good manufacturing practices.
And it also helps create a consistent product as well, which is, of great concern for many business operators. And right now this isn't required, or we haven't defined what the CGMP is yet in cannabis, but it's obviously going to follow form of, some other spaces. So would you consider it a best practice right now in the manufacturing space to understand what CGMP is and try to comport your facility to those requirements?
Absolutely. And, the state inspectors come, they try to come like every year to every facility. And when they come, they want to see this type of documentation, and they want to see that you're following, even though it's not required per se, because we can't be certified to be GMP, but they want to see that you're following those same protocols. So you might as well just set yourself up that way in the beginning, get into the good practice. The other thing that this kind of documentation system or quality management system will give you is, if there's ever an issue or a problem, it gives you documents that you can go back to and say, okay, like when this batch of cookies were made, who was working that day? Who weighed out the extract for this batch? What if it tests really high or something? You can find out who did what and when, and where a mistake may have been made or where an improvement can be made. And God forbid that there's any kind of a recall. It's all part of the document chain.
That's great. It streamlines business efficiency in the long run, but it's definitely a big hurdle for new operators to, get in the groove, initially.
Right.
So next question here. How viable do you see the type S or shared extraction space as being for new social equity entrepreneurs in LA? We know there's a really big scramble for facilities that meet local requirements in LA. So how viable do you see this type S or shared extraction space or manufacturing space being as a license type?
I think it's, I mean, for the equity applicant operator, I think it would be great if they can find a shared manufacturing facility. This way they don't have to have the brunt expense of the facility for themselves. As far as them starting the manufacturing facility and them having the S license, I think it would be a little tough without the right people on your team or the right consultants around you, because it's like taking your manufacturing facility to a higher level, because now you also have to manage other companies that come in and you're responsible for them, and you're responsible for making sure they adhere to certain safety trainings and that they are following all the rules and regulations. And like I said, you have to separate out, if you say you have companies A, B, and C that have signed up to work in your facility, you have to only let them work one company at a time. You have to have separate storage spaces in there for it. So it's definitely doable. And I think, anybody who wants to start an S facility is great, because we need a lot more of them. But you definitely have to have the right people around you.
That's great. All right, I got one last sort of big question for you. What general advice would you give this amazing community of qualified social equity applicants who are looking to start a new cannabis manufacturing business in the wonderful city of LA?
Well, I would say to read your regulations so you know what the city wants from you. And then also really try to be proactive in getting everything done you need to get done, in meeting the people in the city of LA whom you have to work with in order to get your permits, get to know whatever area you're going to be working in or starting up your facility, get to know the local police in that area, get to know your local fire people in that area, because once they know you, and sort of face to face, now that we're a little bit through COVID and you can actually see people face to face again, it's nice to establish those relationships and understand that this is a very regulated industry. You got to be patient, you got to be calm. There's going to be, a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. It's a little bit frustrating, but just make those great relationships, work with your local city and county, and just keep persevering forward.
That's great advice. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time this evening. This was a really, really great introduction to the business of cannabis manufacturing.
My pleasure. I had a great time.
All right. Look forward to seeing you soon. So thank you so much for attending this webinar this evening. And the full course for this topic is already available in the LMS for you to get more detailed information on tonight's subject. Many templates are also available for you to use to support your business planning efforts in this same LMS. During April, we're going to have some more of these series, and starting on Thursday, April 7th, we're going to have tax prediction and compliance with Kevin Holler of Akeen Consulting from 6 to 7 p.m., which will be followed by our next installment on security, on advanced security topics with Chris Eggers on April 12th from 6 to 7 p.m. as well. These should be some really great webinars to check out. So we look forward to seeing you then. I'd also like to share some other key info this evening. Before you leave, please fill out a brief survey to share your experience tonight. We are dropping this link in the chat now, and we really appreciate your feedback, and we're going to use your feedback to help fine-tune these webinars moving forward. And on April 28th, save the date, there will be a virtual job networking opportunity from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the DCR will encourages licensed cannabis businesses to hire local transitional and equity workers. And this virtual job networking opportunity is a great place to facilitate those requirements. You can upload your resume as a job seeker, and employers can also hold one-on-one video interviews during this virtual job networking event. The link is in the chat to sign up for this. And again, this is on April 28th. There's also going to be another link dropped in the chat where you can sign up for coaching, personalized coaching, in order to help figure out your recruitment, retaining, and other job candidate needs. So social equity employers also need to assess, increase, and develop their workforces. And so there's free human resource coaching for equity licensees that has already begun. So you want to sign up to receive individual or small group mentorship specific to your needs, whether that be how to recruit, hire, train, or develop your team while fulfilling LA's good faith hiring requirements. So register for your free personalized workforce development coaching session by following the link in the chat that we're dropping now. The City of Los Angeles has good faith hiring requirements, shortened to GFHR, for all licensed commercial cannabis businesses. To this effect, the city has created a survey to collect information related to these requirements to gain an understanding of the challenges faced by licensed businesses to fulfill these requirements. We are dropping this link in the chat now. The information gathered by this survey will be used to inform future educational programming. Licensees are asked to fill out their survey once for every licensed location on or before tomorrow, April 1st, 2022. So please visit the DCR website to learn more about the good faith hiring requirements, or go to cannabis.lacity.org. Also, this Friday, tomorrow, April 1st, will be our second installment in our series of one-on-one business assistance sessions. These sessions are for operating or aspiring social equity licensees and are a dedicated time for you to discuss your business goals with the same subject matter experts from these webinars. These office hours can be easily accessed by clicking on the Zoom link that we're providing in the chat now. And this Friday and every Friday through the end of April, with the exception of Friday, April 15th, we will be hosting these one-on-one coaching sessions for the following categories at the following times. From noon to 1 p.m., we'll have patient and consumer safety with Tiffany Watkins. From 1 to 2 p.m., we will have retail operations with Maha Hawk. From 2 to 3 p.m., we'll have delivery operations with Robert Fierro. From 3 to 4 p.m., we'll have the business of cannabis distribution with Angie Panuela Ruiz. And from 4 to 5 p.m., we'll have manufacturing operations with tonight's subject matter expert, Dr. Stephanie Gangano. So please be sure to also register for all of these April events. We'll be dropping in the link for that registration now. So on behalf of the Department of Cannabis Regulation, I'd like to thank you for attending. Have a great night, and I'll see you real soon.